Now I just see the code everywhere in how it comes alive in people in speaking. Even when you were talking about accolades earlier, that's purple language. And when your red combines with your orange and combines with your purple, that is the opportunist triad. That's what led you to be on The Bachelor. In the same extreme, that red, orange, and purple is the corruptible, which may be why post-Bachelor you started getting some of the feedback that you got. But it's not anything where that's fixed or forever. It's just a temporary, momentary snapshot of an evaluation because we always grow and develop.
The color matrix is essentially a personality test.
Yeah, personality insight tool and a relationship help technology. Orange, I'm always on. I'm always doing a show because I'm constantly trying to entertain. It's the spirit of who I am. That's exhausting. Yellow have a tendency to look at the world and look for the love, and they thrive off of connection and intimacy. With green personality tendencies, it's all about fairness. So they want to have conversations that allow people to grow. They want to be able to bring people together and form senses of community. Reds will set their sights on a goal, and they will let nothing get in the way of that, purely because they believe so much in themselves. Purples approach everything in terms of achievement. It's not about getting my way, it's about getting it done. Blue will take the time and needs the solitude in order to learn and understand how things work. And so the tool of the color matrix is really to give people a way to change their outlook and unlock grace and understanding. So really ultimately facilitates connection. And then as a result, we can improve communication and we can reduce conflict.
Welcome everyone to the Beyond the Cover podcast. My intent with creating this podcast was to provide a platform where men can speak openly about their journeys with mental health without fear of judgment while doing so. While I, the host, or you, the listener, may not agree with everything or anything that a certain guest says for that matter, my focus is not to decipher what is right or wrong. Rather, it's to gain a better understanding of why somebody thinks and acts the way that they do. And with this understanding, we will begin to make better sense of our own lives and the world around us. So join me as we open the books into these men's journeys and dissect the pages within. Corbin Billings, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Man, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited to connect.
I am grateful to have you here because you're someone that can go deep with conversations. And my podcast is all about going beyond the cover and really opening a book and diving into the pages and realizing that people are so much more complex than what we give them credit for oftentimes, because some people maybe don't read the language, they don't know how to read the language within the book. They speak a different language, or some people are just too afraid to open the book because they don't know what they're going to be opening themselves. Is this Pandora's box? What's behind all of this? And that's where I want to have these open, transparent, vulnerable conversations because they need to be had. And what we're going to dive into today was not what I planned on talking about, but that's what I love. That's why I stopped you and I said, listen, we got to get this on. Like, this is where the direction I'm going. Because a lot of times, I start off and I have these notes, and it's like, okay, I don't know what situation I'm walking into, so let me, of course, do my due diligence and prep. But then I feel something in the moment, and I really try to live into the presence, and that's where when I'm in that present moment, I can feel a shift occurring. And that's what happens as you sat down and we started talking. I'm like, the conversation that we're going to talk about today is not at all what I thought we would be talking about, but it's going to be on the topic of shadow work.
Oh, Carl Jung is clapping in his grave right now.
See, and you have a plethora of knowledge because on the cover. So, and we're going to have some fun with these sunglasses for some of these people that are just listening. Corbin has 6 different sunglasses of all different colors because Corbin is one of the creators of the color matrix. And so the color matrix is essentially a personality test.
Yeah, personality insight tool and a relationship help technology.
And so it's meant to allow you to tap into your deeper self, to get to understand who you are.
And others. So really ultimately facilitates connection. Mm-hmm. And then as a result, we can improve communication and we can reduce conflict.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of the times the pain points in our life happen to be finances, or there's some level of stress in organization, or sometimes it really boils down to communication, whether it's professional or it's in our personal relationships. And sometimes those pain points, they live under the surface, like, because we want to be right in a way. We want to be, we want things to be fair, and we don't feel like they're actually balanced. There's so many different sort of outlooks that then influence perception and then can lead to misunderstanding and then ultimately create division.
Yeah.
And so the tool of the color matrix is really to give people an outlet or a way to change their outlook in order to find common ground and unlock grace and understanding, because the alternative really is cutting people out of your life, burning bridges as opposed to building them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. I think it's so powerful because our personalities are complex. And as I've had these deep conversations with people, you start to get lost in just the how deep something can go. I mean, our inner workings, we're constantly trying to figure out why we are the way that we are. I've, of course, learned that a lot of who I am is because of the hardwiring that I had starting all the way back from my childhood, even before I was conscious. So from a young age, like the things that my parents were doing that I don't even remember, but that, my baby brain was picking up on, and the behaviors and the things they were saying, we truly have this massive influence at an early age that then molds us into who we are. And so, talk about doing the work. I've been diving into healing my child self and realizing that while I didn't experience big T trauma, I wasn't abused, I didn't have something major happen. It was still major in that it falls into like the little T trauma, which is perceived trauma is a part of that. And realizing that my feelings of worthlessness and just wanting to try to impress others became the catalyst for why I started becoming so accomplishment oriented. And so my whole life journey became, how many accolades can I accrue? And then once I get enough on the shelf, like, well, you now see me as enough. And truthfully, people already saw me as enough, but I never did. So as I kept acquiring accolades, it was just like, I'm not enough until I finally choose to feel that I am, because there's people that are living in my hometown that haven't done any of the things that I've done, and yet they're happier than me. How does that work? And I'm like, well, that's because they chose to be happy, and you didn't or aren't.
So there's a couple of keywords that I want to hone in right here that you're mentioning, because I think we can harken back to them later. But like accolades, feelings of self-worth or insufficiency, and then a lot of those being related to like heart, and emotional support. All of these things in your nurture informed elements of how your nature evolved. So, let's say, we're all inborn with certain qualities or personality tendencies. That is the nature part of our personality, but also our environment shapes those over time through what we call context. And so we really look at personality as it's more plastic. It's fluid, really. Like, we are different people in different eras of our life, like Taylor Swift, or in different contexts. We're not the same person at work as we are at home. Sometimes we're not the same person with our parents as we are with our children. And so what our technology allows people to do is really assess themselves in each of those contexts, primarily who they are under stress, who they ideally want to be, who they are when they're enraged and they really blow their lid, who they are at work, and who they are in their personal life. And we also give them the ability to create a context so they can figure out who they are when they're behind the wheel of a car, because sometimes personalities completely change in that dynamic. Or you can hone in on a specific relationship, take it every year on your birthday, and figure out how you're changing and developing, how your outlook is changing, because that also interplays into how you show up in other people's lives, how they experience you. And sometimes we can feel misunderstood, or we can feel like, wow, why are people getting this interpretation of me that isn't matching my intention. It almost feels like people are projecting things onto me. Well, this is how we untangle all of those knots of miscommunication and then create something that's more streamlined. So it comes down to like the workplace. You can increase sales and productivity because not only do you know your sales force or your team better, but you know your customer better if we're able to understand where they're coming at with their perspective, because it's really individualistic at the end of the day. Like one of our core pillars is that perspective is subjective. So although we tend to want to believe that the way that we defaultly see the world, or the way we see the world by default, is the way that everybody else naturally sees it.
That would be easy.
But the truth is more akin to the fact that, like, I've got these lenses on
Mm-hmm.
as I'm looking at reality, and I don't even know, I'm not conscious of the fact that I'm wearing them.
Yeah.
And so this is why when somebody else doesn't see things the way that I do, I tend to want to label them.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to want to kind of otherize them in order to vindicate myself and my own point of view.
Yeah.
Because honestly, their difference is sometimes in value systems or belief systems that can then threaten an individual's identity.
Mm-hmm.
So all the colors have their different motivations, interpretations. And what's miraculous is that even though it's really balanced and based on the 6 ones that compose the artist color wheel in that circle, they dance and blend with each other in ways. So nobody's ever really one color. All the colors are in you,
Yeah.
but in different context, the 6 of them get ranked in a different priority.
Mm.
And so we really look at your top 3 colors
Yeah.
in any context of life or emotion. And then from that, we get your color blend.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps us hone in on actually building bridges of communication by finding commonality.
Yeah.
Because so many times we're just focused on what's not in alignment.
Yeah.
That we can't even sit down in the same room to have the conversation. And that's sort of what's led to this rampant polarization
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of politics or ideology.
Yeah.
Especially since the 1960s.
Yeah.
It's always been going on, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
in all of human civilization. There's been this real interesting difference in value systems that we define as strength and warmth.
Okay.
Strength is more people that think with their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Warmth is more people who believe and feel with their hearts.
Yeah.
And there's an intuitive and a magic that can come from warmth. And then there's a practicality and a necessary structure.
Mm.
But then when we get into the shadow, right? Warmth, or rather, I'm pointing at my head right now, so I'm going to go, strength has an extreme where even though it provides the structure and foundation, it can become rigid
Mm-hmm.
and it can become restrictive.
Yeah.
And it's it can be seen as a prison. Meanwhile, warmth, when it gets into its extremes of, let's say, capriciousness, carefreeness, not taking things so seriously or letting them go, it fails to take accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets really unstable.
Yeah.
And as a result, we're more focused on our rights than our responsibilities. And
Yeah.
that leads to a deterioration of the structure.
Mm.
And that's really what's happened in these polarizing movements. And you can see extreme strength sometimes embodied in aspects of dictatorships or autocracies. And then you can see aspects of extreme warmth in actually, they both show up in the realm of protest. You just basically be looking at people that are MAGA as a little bit more aligned with the strength. And then people and that's more towards a concept of conservatism, protecting traditional values because
Mm-hmm.
this is what we've built on,
Mm-hmm.
versus something that's more interested in progress and change in what could be. But then it's also, in a way, in its extreme, it tries to undermine tradition and it tries to usurp. So it's very interesting just trying to figure out how to mitigate those extremes, and rather than try to, it's like a tree, the branches being the warmth and the roots being the strength. And it's as if the tree is hacking itself at that trunk, that middle ground, thinking that if we just cut out the people that we disagree with or don't see the world the same way, well, then we'll be better off in our life experience or our peace.
But really, it's taking itself out.
Well, the entire tree then ceases to be because
Yeah.
it's hewed itself in two.
Mm.
So this is where we talk about the need right now, especially in our Western civilization and culture, to remember that we're one, even though we're not the same.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I think again, being able to see us as a collective and being able to conversate, create the communications to be able to find the similarities. The more that I've communicated, the more that I've been open about my insecurities and the things that drive me and I'm passionate about, and putting that out there to the universe has brought it back. And so it makes me feel less alone. I feel more connected. No matter what, political beliefs somebody has, no matter what religious beliefs they have, I'm like, I can connect with you just from an energetic standpoint, which has become so extremely powerful. But what I've found is, and I think to have this discussion, especially going into shadow work, there has to be some basis of belief that, you're not all of your thoughts, just the ones that you choose to believe or enact and follow. But also, again, how many parts are we? So for me personally, as I've went into this deep journey, the first separation was between me and my ego. And I go, okay, I'm starting to feel something different, as in I'm not now just one being. I have some other part of me that's trying to always interject, and it gets in the way, and it, causes me to act up and get emotional. And this happened when I came off, The Bachelor. I had my ego was damaged very, very deeply, and people were attacking me and my character. And so then my ego got defensive and said things like to myself, like, well, they're all idiots. And that if they knew the full context, then they would think differently. And how dare they, tell me that I'm not deserving. And, how dare they attack, what you've built? Like, you're an incredible human being, and they're just stupid. And that was the way that my ego framed it to protect myself. Well, then people kept coming after me, and that was my ego said, okay, well, just keep explaining yourself. That's what you need to do. And eventually they'll get it. And when they didn't get it, i.e. when they just kept saying, no, like he keeps trying to explain his point of view, and we understand what he's saying, but he's wrong. And my ego is like, no, we're not. They're so stupid. Like, you're trying to spell it out for them. Well, eventually I was overwhelmed by all the criticism, and I was defeated. My ego was beaten to a pulp where it's like, I can't keep defending myself. And it was in that moment that my ego at this point was now in the corner crying. And I saw a comment online that said, I understand where he's coming from. He keeps explaining himself. I get it. But the problem is he's trying to convince us all why he did what he did. It was right, when he just needs to take accountability for his actions. And that's how he'll heal. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's it. My ego was so focused on being right, because it was afraid that if I'm wrong, people are going to like X me out of their life. Because that's how, I was in the environment that I was in growing up. It was like, if you get 3 strikes, you're out. That's the way that I saw it. So I'm like, the more times that I'm wrong, the more likely someone's going to cut me out of their life. That was the way that I carried myself. And so I was so afraid of being cut out of people's lives. I was like, I can only be wrong so many times. So in this instance, as everyone hates me, I need to prove that I'm right. But then it was like, no, once my ego was, wrong about that and was beaten to a pulp, it was like, whatever, I can't even like be involved right now. All of a sudden, my conscious mind was able to pull from the internet and be like, oh my gosh, like it's all about understanding. It's about accountability.
Wow.
And so I dove into that. And that was the first point when I felt there was this separation between my conscious self and my ego. But then it goes deeper than that, because then there's the subconscious mind that oftentimes has people in a place of autopilot. Autopilot is a place that people go to when in their subconscious, and it's to make things easier. It's so that we don't have to think and use brain power to drive to work and walk in and do these daily tasks. But then what happens is you can turn into a zombie, because then you're just not consciously there. You're just going through the motions. And so then I'm like, okay, so there's the conscious and subconscious, and then the shadow came into the forefront. So now I'm at a place where I'm like trying to understand, and I want to get your opinion on this. I'm currently seeing it as conscious mind is one entity. Subconscious mind is like the second entity. And I would say the subconscious mind is where the ego and alter ego exists. So like, to me, they're not 4 separate parts. It's ego and alter ego are part of the subconscious. So I would say, I guess it's a separation of 2, conscious to subconscious, with like subgroups. How would you define that? And are there more parts in your head? Because I'm sure there may be.
Well, so here I'm going to kind of pull from Alan Watts,
okay,
and I'm going to pull a little bit from Jung. But it's really interesting, because although the human mind will tend to want to deconstruct, especially if we're of a strength inclined mind, specifically colors that are like blue and purple. We want to like methodically understand and solve problems, right? And so then that leads us to sometimes go into subcategorization of things, which is great, because ultimately it provides us greater understanding, because things are actually parts of things. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it leads in the process of deconstructing into all the separate parts of the ego, the subconscious, the shadow. All it will lead to ultimately in a destination is understanding of oneness, that it is all actually one, despite our attempt to try to categorize it or subdivide it. And there's sort of a real universal, simplicity and beauty to that, but it also is a very, very deep understanding to go to. And it's sort of a concept of integration. So if we're looking at something like Jung in the shadow would be about acknowledging the potentiality for chaos, or the potentiality for what we say in our technology are extremes to take over.
Yeah. So can we, I guess, quickly just describe shadow self?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the aspect of ourselves that is driven by our perceived, this is how I'm going to personally define it.
Okay.
It's an aspect of ourselves that is a defense mechanism that is sometimes driven by perceived lack.
Okay.
I believe that ultimately the way that we really talk about this is a concept of extremes, which is just like when we miss the mark in our relationships or our personal lives or whatever. And this comes down to like a concept of narcissistic entitlement. That's sort of a key word for us. It's the root of misery and miscommunication. And it stems from us looking at our reality and going, what I have is not enough. I deserve more.
Okay.
That feeling of insufficiency or emptiness changes our internal motivations. And this is sort of what I equate to being the enemy that whispers in your ear. Whether it's you want to personify that as the little devil on your shoulder, but it's that voice in your head that sometimes will lead us into doing things that are potentially more selfish or self-centered, self-serving, as opposed to acknowledging our oneness or the collective, the connectivity of it all.
So would an example be like somebody is in a business deal situation and they are going to, maybe let's say for real estate, like I'm thinking real estate because I work in real estate. They have the potential to make $100,000 commission or hey, split it, but amongst someone that they had a conversation with. It's like, yeah, let's work this deal together. And then they go, well, I could also just have double the commission, which means I could go buy that Porsche that I want to buy right now. Yeah. And so like that's that moment where they're like, that shadow self is saying like, how about you just leave them out? They'll never know.
So there's an interesting thing. If you want to see the shadow self at work, just watch Mr. Beast videos, especially like Beast games that just came out because, in some ways it really does show these moments where people actually get in touch with the collective when they refuse $1 million because they don't want to disqualify all the people in their team. Mm-hmm. And people watch that and they go, how is this even possible that this guy, and then there's also that moment where somebody takes a much bigger share of the pie than what would be fair or equitable. Yeah. And even, there's really this fight that goes on between strength and warmth about strength being individualistically based. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. And then things in the warmth side being more about sharing, nurturing that community. And, this is kind of like the strong father energy versus the nurturing mother energy. It's not to say that it necessarily, you can't have women that embody strength and men that embody warmth. Right. But it really does align, interestingly, with the masculine and feminine. Mm-hmm. There's a give and a take there where you want to find balance. Yeah. And the ultimate charisma that it's unlocked by being in the middle between that strength and that warmth, being able to speak both languages, as opposed to finding yourselves on the extreme of either. Yeah. Because then the shadow self of extreme strength will take over. And even though you provide the structure, you become somebody who controls people. Mm-hmm. And if they don't do what you say, there's consequences. Yeah. And then you can even escalate that into physical violence versus, if you're looking at somebody who is in the extreme warmth side of the spectrum, they are actively looking for ways that they are victimized in life in order to create excuses that allow them not to take accountability. Now, here's the beauty. Once again, with the shadow self, the whole point is integration. We will pretend like we don't have a shadow, but it follows us everywhere. Yeah. And so this comes into like a concept that you and we talk about, or Peterson talks about this as well, is the cave. And there's a monster in everyone's cave that lives in the shadows. It's your job is to enlighten yourself so that your presence illuminates and you are conscious of your monster, because at that point, it can't catch you by surprise. You fully integrated it, and in a way, you've tamed it so that when it inevitably emerges, because we all go into our extremes, we can't help it. Yeah. The question is, how quickly are you able to navigate your way back to a centered state? Because that's going to end your misery, and it's also going to end the misery of people around you. Simultaneously, it will build your confidence and allow other people to build their confidence in you, because they go, wow, this person, even life throws challenges at us, but the way that they handle them inspires me, it draws me in closer. I want to learn from them or emulate them. And at that point, you're a really powerful role model in your community. Yeah.
Do you think that it's worth shining light for the collective to see your shadow? So in a way, the way that I'm framing this and thinking about it is like, here I am having a conversation about shadow self. And the way that I had it explained to me was it's the repressed version of you, the version that you feel, that you have these thoughts, that some of them you want to act upon. It could be like something sexual. So like, you have these cravings that like you don't want people to know about because you feel shameful about it, but it is a part of you. Or, you have these, desires to get one up on people, and you're like, where's this coming from? Why am I trying to, screw over somebody? It's like, for what? For like, again, maybe it's to get a business deal, to make more money, for some selfish desire. And so it's that version of you that, again, like, it's in the dark, that we don't want people to know. Like, I don't want you to see this, but it still exists in who I am. And so do you feel that illuminating our shadows is the way to go about it, or is that dangerous? Because if all of a sudden we shine light on something that's not ready to be seen, can it be premature in essence? Before we hopped on here, we jumped in, and that's where I was like, hey, let's stop this conversation and put it on camera. But I've been diving into shadow work a lot recently, realizing that my shadow self has a lot to do with a deeper level of confidence that I wasn't allowing to myself to embody. And so, especially with women, I always thought that I was this goofy guy. And it stems all the way back to when I was in middle school. I got called Big Brother. That was my nickname by a lot of the girls in my class. And I hated it because it was me being friend zoned is what it was. Mm-hmm. And so I took on, like, they told me, you're just this funny, goofy guy. And so I took on that persona to be liked, because I'm like, well, at least I'm still in the room with these people. At least I'm still being accepted, but they don't want to date me. And it's because they can't see me in that capacity. Well, I end up then pushing away sex appeal. I end up pushing away, like, I'm not desirable. I'm just like the good friend, right? But my shadow self has struggled with that a lot recently, where, like, when I go on social media, I see a lot of other Bachelor Nation guys or other influencers that have this sex appeal. They're posting, shirtless videos, and the girls are drooling over them in the comments. Or like, they're all over them. Oh my gosh, he's the perfect man. And I'm like, I want that. My shadow self's like, that's what I want. But then I'm like, but I'm not the guy that's going to take a shirtless video. Like, that's not me. Like, that's just not my character. I don't want to do that, but I want to be desirable. Mm-hmm. So as of recently, as I've been reading into shadow work, I'm like, okay, I have to, like, allow this to exist, but it starts with me. I have to have this conscious belief that I do possess desirability. Mm-hmm. So I started embodying that, and it's been crazy how all of a sudden now this level of attraction has ramped up times 1,000. So I gave my alter ego a name, and it's Snack is the name. And I don't want to go into detail yet. I told you why I named it that.
Snack is a snack. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, but there's a deeper story for another time. And I'm not quite yet ready to, like, explain why I gave it that name, but it's interesting because I learned that, successful people in life have alter egos. And so I shared this with you, but Eminem has Slim Shady. Lil Wayne has Wheezy, and then Kobe Bryant had Black Mamba. And they would all talk about how when they went into these alter ego or shadow selves states, they were able to create from a different place. And it was still a version of them. It was just like a different character. Mm-hmm. And they could turn it on, and it could level them up, or like get them to a place in life that their conscious self wasn't able to get to alone with. So you start to realize the value in having a shadow self. Well, for me, like, as of recently, I've been able to tap into my shadow self with the simple trick of putting on a hat. And as I throw a hat on, it was brought up through my dance instructor. And she's like, you know what you should do? I came with a hat one day, it was popped up. I just started wearing the hat because I was like, I like the way I look in hats. And she's like, you look good in hats. And I was like, I always thought I looked bad. She goes, no, it looks good on you, especially with your hair flopping out the back and all that. And she goes, you should pull it down lower. And I pull it down lower, and I look in the mirror. I'm like, no, I can't do that. She goes, why not? She goes, does it not look good? I go, it does look good, but it's not me. Mm. She goes, why not? Why don't you just embody it? And I was like, I feel like I don't know. It feels like a darker version of me. She's like, well, is that a bad thing? Mm. And I was like, huh. So I had a date that night. So she was like, go on that date with your hat pulled down. And I was like, well, no, because that's not me. She goes, that girl won't know. She's meeting you for the first time. And I was like, you're right. So I put the hat on, and I felt like I was a different person. Mm. And I had this confidence greater than I've ever had before. And when I tell you I had sex appeal, like, I had sex appeal. It came out. I just was like not trying, but I was confident. I was just like, I wasn't rushing things out, like word vomiting to try to stop silence from occurring. I was embodying the silence. I was, more present, slower paced. And I left that night being like, holy hell, like, I gave this other side of me permission to exist. And it's allowing me to, like, have a greater experience in relationships. Mm-hmm. Like, I want more of this. So now it's like, I'm okay. Now I've just, for the first time, said on camera, like, I have this other side of me, but it's scary because it's like, I don't know if I want to share too much about it because while I'm afraid that potentially it could override me, or something could come out that's like, I don't want you all to know. So how do you navigate that? Like, because okay, I want to also talk about the color schemes. Like, there's 6 different color schemes. So am I playing with 2 different colors? Is my shadow a different color than my conscious?
Actually, okay. So what's really fascinating is that just in listening to you in this dialogue, right, I've been able to sort of see some colors that are lighting up and you in different contexts, and they're sort of in all different orders and all over the place, but they're alive, and that's cool. So just go to the first thing, right? Is it good to explore our shadow self? And understand that. Is that valuable, and is expressing that vulnerability publicly ultimately beneficial?
Yes.
Right? I would say yes, because what is it? It's essentially equatable to sort of an analogy of light and shadow, where when light exists, darkness ceases to be. And this is the same way that it ultimately exists with love and fear. And when we're in a place where we're not authentically embodying ourselves, or we're in a place where we're conscious of how other people are perceiving us or being judged, we're living in a fear mentality. And then this generates the perceived lack. So when you were talking earlier about your shadow self, right? Your shadow self says, I want that. I want what the other Bachelor Nation people are getting, right? This is what I'm talking about when it comes down to narcissistic entitlement. It's the feeling of deserving, because I'm looking out at my surroundings and I don't feel like I'm getting what I deserve.
Yeah.
And then that leads me to, in the business deal, cheat somebody, or that leads me to go and cheat in my personal relationships. It leads us to do things that essentially break covenants and harm communication or hurt emotions, and those leave consequences. Now, each coloring interpretation of the world and perspective has their own trigger points. And those trigger points, like flipping a light switch, take them from a person who is so wonderful and harmonious in their center into an extreme version of themselves where they become unrecognizable. So essentially, this is like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde scenario. And this is endemic in the shadow self. That story is one of our core allegories of understanding the psyche. And it really comes down to, how do we integrate chaos and order? Because chaos is highly creative, but it's also highly destructive. Order is highly stabilizing, but it also deteriorates. And so these two have to do a dance. And this is why I go back to Alan Watts. He said the perfect recipe, and this is storytelling, this is our lives, this is how the universe works in general, is a recipe of 1/3 dark, 2/3 light. Because it's always got to be, there's this threat, the Avengers won't win. Thanos snapped everybody out of existence, but light always triumphs, because it is simply the principle of the universe that where light exists, shadow ceases to be. So the more that you bring your surface and your authentic self to light, the less opportunity there is for people to misunderstand you, the more authentically you can communicate and present yourself, which will only strengthen your communication, not only in social media, but your one-on-one communication. There's some things that have happened in your core heart as a child, because you came into this world a very warmth-related person. And that plays into your goofiness. We're going to get on what that color is in a second, but really it's one of your biggest, brightest colors. And there's a wounding that happened to that warmth side of you. And so it leaned into this strength side of, how can I build myself up essentially into something that is irrefusable? And I can exactly relate to this because, and I'm so happy that I'm the podcast guest that you selected for this conversation. I did this. I created an alter ego named Fluid, who was my shadow self personified. I would dress in all black and put in black sclera contacts when I would perform. And this shadow self allowed me, because Corbin Billings was so wounded by heartbreak and decided to build a self-defense mechanism that was a coat of armor in persona, where I would put on a hood like you put on a hat. And then I would go out and with ultimate charisma, unlock doors to levels that Corbin could never access. And I literally did. I would find myself not only on physical levels of reality, like bars in LA that technically don't exist, but here I am. And this is like the cantina from Star Wars. It's insane. To unlocking new levels of consciousness and understanding in a metaphysical sense, because the world isn't always just physical. There is a spiritual side of us. And that's where we get more into that unconscious. The more that we can make that unconscious conscious, the more integrated we are, and the more that we actually remember who we are. And that word remember is so key, because it is literally remembering something that we perceive to be separate. So if you will go through all of these rabbit holes of, and it goes deep, of trying to pick apart, well, this part of me is my unconscious, and this part of me is my subconscious, and this part of me is my id, and this part is my ego, and this part is my shadow work. I have just turned myself, I've pulled myself like Laffy Taffy or silly putty in so many different directions that what's my identity now, as opposed to I'm something that's much more consolidated in the fact that I go, all of these things are myself. I don't deny any of them. I bring them all to the surface, and I live with nothing to hide as the light. And I believe in that case, you're truly a luminary. You're truly an enlightened being on the planet, and you'll inspire other people to light up as opposed to going and hiding in the shadows.
Gosh, man, that's so incredibly powerful, because I think, again, also life becomes so much simpler when you can just be as you are, and not have to, it is work that I have to carry out where I'm like, what's talking right now? It's my ego. Okay. Or I feel my shadow self, stepping up right now. And I think, ultimately I'd like to get to a place where I don't have to like consciously make these statements.
Do you know what it really comes down to? What the cure for all of the narcissistic entitlement or the shadow self or any of it is?
What is it?
Appreciation. It's just when we look at things from the perceived scarcity mindset, all we see is the lack.
Yeah.
And then when we look at things from an abundancy mindset, all we see is the blessings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I begin to go like, wow, I was on The Bachelor. Wow, I have a whole bunch of people that care about me enough in order to have my name in their mouth.
Yeah.
Wow, I essentially am in the top 1% of sex appeal, despite, what my own limiting beliefs may be. Mm-hmm. So you have this moment where as you explore the liminal spaces, and that's like the boundaries of your consciousness. And that's really what shadow work is. That's the spaces where the transformation happens. Mm-hmm. It's in those boundaries of self, and that's really like even what the technology and the colors does. We look and understand the limitations in the structure of our reality. Really, that these colors, these 6 colors, show up in differing ways with all these people. Yeah. And in understanding the limitations of reality, we find the liberation. Mm. We can just be. Mm-hmm. We don't have to be self-critical. With your dominant color, if I could, I'd love to dive into like explaining them now, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So the color that shows up the most with you is orange. Okay. And orange is somebody who, we really center this color in terms of mirth. That means just like joviality. They are looking for the thrill, the adventure, and the fun in life. If you want to get an orange motivated, we need to figure out how to make this an event with champagne or confetti. Please don't make me do menial tasks. I don't like taxes. I will always seek to try to be the center of attention. I love spotlight, and I'm spontaneous. You may come in with your notes trying to be, a little bit more, we'll get into it later, purple. Like, here's what I've come to talk about. But then you'll go, throw it away. We're in the moment. We're spontaneous. So, but then we get into the extreme of orange. Okay. Orange, I'm always on. I'm always doing a show because I'm constantly trying to entertain. It's the spirit of who I am. That's exhausting. Yeah. Then there's a point where I'm overstretched because I'm trying to people please, naturally so social and outgoing. But there's a certain fragility that can also be because you're vulnerable to the whim of the public and people's perceptions. So while there's great, tremendous opportunity for confidence, there's also a potential for feeling like insufficient or not enough. And so then that sometimes drives oranges to either try too hard or they'll just seek to escape. And so a great example of like someone who lived orange and really embodied that, there's a lot of other colors going on in their blend, but Robin Williams. So we get the height of charisma, bouncing all over the place, and energetic, comedic. So you can't take your eyes off of him, magnetic, really good with words and inspiring. Then you get into the shadow side or the extreme side, and we are prone to addiction. We're trying to find escape in anything. We can't take accountability for anything. We want to run away from our problems as opposed to confronting them. What's really interesting is that oranges usually have a great capacity for grace because they've screwed up in life so many times that when other people screw up, they're like, okay, hey, I've been there. Mm-hmm. When you get an orange really upset is when you corner them and you say, hey, that thing that you want, your vice, you can't have it. That's when the addict turns into the beast. Mm. And oranges have a really great way with words. Also, if you're doing a podcast, if you're doing any kind of content creation, if you're in front of a camera, there's orange qualities that are there because not everybody has that desire. I have orange, right? And it really speaks to communication. But then in the extreme, that communication becomes a tongue that leaves wounds because we'll get into some of the other colors that can have acrimony, but oranges know exactly what to say that's going to hurt the most. And that's why they say it.
And I've done that.
So, and then this ultimately comes down to like, I want to be loved. I want to have fun and I want people to see the value of me. And I want the thrill, I want the experience. But then in chasing those experiences and all of that, I become highly unreliable, I become highly volatile, and I have a tendency to self-sabotage. So it's like, the best of orange are the people that don't really take things too seriously in life, and they can really flow with it. And honestly, the guy who was drinking cranberry or ocean spray while he was skateboarding on his way to work. The reason why that went viral and that guy was so rewarded was because he was effortlessly in his orange flow of lip syncing on his skateboard. It's great. But then you also get into the extreme of orange in a video that went viral around the same time of the people racing their Teslas in Echo Park or somewhere around there in Los Angeles, and they're ramping at 60 miles per hour and then crashing into other cars and trash cans. Like, that's when orange is in its extreme shadow self.
Wow. Well, you were spot on with that. I mean, I could relate to everything you said there. So
then when we get into what else is going on, I'm going to address baby Clayton. I'm going to talk to 10-year-old, right?
You're going to do it in baby voice?
I'm going to just explain it to you like a 10-year-old. Yellow personality tendencies have a tendency to look at the world and look for the love. They are the heart of our society, and they thrive off of connection and intimacy. They want to serve, but the way that they want to serve is very much person to person. So really focused in, let's say, the realm of work, they're really focused on customer service, or if they're a care provider, literally, they're providing care. In their personal relationships, they don't like conflict, and they will actively seek to avoid it, do everything but then that ultimately, they're very emotional people, and they can be wounded. So while we are really serving with that strong Hufflepuff energy in the center, in the extreme, they become so obsessed with how they've been victimized that they can't actually operate. They sort of get immobilized by their emotions. Now, when a yellow's heart is wounded and they go into that victim place, then they'll figure out strategies for self-preservation, and so that their heart cannot be broken again. What actually ends up happening in that case is sometimes that yellow stops being one of their primary colors as they move forward in life. However, when they take the test in their ideal self, the yellow shows up very pronounced, as it did when you took the test. And so ultimately, they're going out in their love life, because what we test high in and looking at our ideal self is actually what we're looking for in partners in order to complement and supplement us. And so you're looking for someone who is actually authentically nurturing, who can see you and value you, where almost you wouldn't even be necessary to wear the cap. Sneck wouldn't even actually need to exist. Sneck exists as the orange's way of stepping up to the plate in tangent with a color that we're going to get into next, to say, hey, yellow, it's okay. We've got you, baby. And what actually needs to happen is that your yellow needs to be given a big hug because something was lacking there in your parental structure. And now, actively in life, you're seeking sort of where that can be. I've done this too in my own life, right? And it's a beautiful thing to ultimately get to yellow, because sometimes, it's a color that I test the lowest in. And it's because sometimes it comes off as cheesy to me. But when I got my first dog, Luna, I developed such an attachment to this animal that I was like, oh, my heart is so open, and the way that it gets filled with you. And I started to go, wow, this is the beautiful inspiration of yellow. And there's such a strong moral thing there. Yellows, if they go into that extreme place, they feel like you betrayed me and I can never trust you again. That leads them into essentially going into a place of super passive aggressiveness. So let's say super extreme version of yellow, Lorena Bobbitt, so much abuse in the husband relationship that she eventually cuts his member off. Versus yellow in its center is Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. When I had my son, who's 2 now, my yellow is so crazy now that, in that context, even though my yellow doesn't necessarily show up so much, even though I help people strategize with their relationships, when I'm just there with my son, my yellow is overflowing and inflates like a balloon in that context. Yellow has to be, well, actually, what we're doing right now is we're doing all the warmth colors. So I'm going to retract this. This color's going on in you, but it's not the one that is trying to protect and cover your yellow child heart. But greens complete our warmth thing. So if it's yellow, orange, and green, we're dealing with warmth values, which once again have a really easy time letting go. They have a very hard time taking accountability. With green personality tendencies, it's all about fairness. And they'll look at the world. This actually is part of what goes on with you in let's say, a professional environment, because they care about visions and causes that are bigger than them. So in their center, people with strong green personality tendencies are like gardeners of hope. So they want to have conversations that allow people to grow. They want to speak into possibility. They want to be able to bring people together in form senses of community, because they really find a great deal of their identity in their group identity. Belonging to something really helps them understand who they are. Just like for a yellow, belonging to someone helps me really understand. So we take all of the aspects where yellow is really moralistic and caring, and we take that from an individual level to a group level, where now I can be offended on behalf of other people. This speaks into where green gets into its extreme. So, but focusing on the center, green is like, I'm going to plant the seed for this tree so that the tree will grow, and 7 generations from now, someone will hang a swing on it and a child will be able to find joy. These are people who actively seek and create meaning. And we're all meaning-making machines, but it's people who have strong green tendencies that, this comes out in the form of artistic expression or just openness in terms of belief systems. People that have strong green tendencies are religious, or if they're not religious, they're spiritual. If not, then they are very convinced in their own moralistic ideological meaning, right? And what ends up happening as a result of that green, they're so focused on fairness, justice, that when things aren't justice or aren't fair, then they go into an extreme, which then this takes the form of any group that gets tribalistic and chooses to hate other groups. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is, even though the way that our political spectrum is structured, that we want to say, one side is this and one side is that, both extremes are actually green. Whether you're on the extreme conservative side of the spectrum or the extreme liberal side of the perspective, that it's the fact that I go, those people and what they believe is a cancer in our society. It needs to be eradicated. So when you get into green extreme, even though centered green individuals would be like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, they're uniters. In the extreme, you get the Ku Klux Klan, you get the 9/11 hijackers, you get any kind of form of terrorism that is ideologically trying to intimidate based on perceptions of groups of people and seeking and this is why it's so interesting, the range when green is in its center, how beautiful and harmonious. They really care about unity. It's Bob Marley music, it's Rasta. But then in that extreme, it really transforms. It's the biggest dynamic shift. So that really honestly explains like a lot of what's going on with our, cancel culture movement.
1,000%. Yeah, everything you just described. I mean, it's like you can really identify. You start putting people into color schemes, and then you can start to make so much sense. I mean, I can tell you for the first color that when you threw on the orange glasses, I mean, there was everything you were speaking to. There was some type of story that I could throw at it from my life. And
that's the beauty, is we see ourselves in the colors, because, really most personality assessment tools are looking to try to typify you. They want to say, okay, here's our 4-quadrant thing. You are red. Ours is so the opposite. It's like, here's boxes that you personally, voluntarily step into. And we kind of call those archetypes. So there's 20 color blends that are available that almost form an icosahedron of what we can step into in different roles. And each color blend is associated with those. And it's really interesting to dive into that. It gets, like I say, we want to talk getting deep. I'm trying to keep it super like just the basics. But here's the one that before, now we're moving into strength value systems. Here's what shows up to really protect. And it's the red personality tendencies. It's all about determination. And it's about drive. Reds will set their sights on a goal, and they will let nothing get in the way of that, purely because they believe so much in themselves. So I look at like Captain America as a really great embodiment of that red. Of course, he's got the super soldier serum, but even before he had it, he could do this all day. Reds don't give up. And that persistence ultimately gets them where they need to go. So when, red isn't necessarily one of my strongest colors, but when I'm around centered red, I'm like, I need to bask in it, like soaking up some vitamin D from the sun. They're really driven by honor, respect, duty, and they show up to protect. Now, you take that into an extreme where a red is not allowed to get what they want or where they're going. You better get out of the way. Red extremes are why we need a police apparatus because the red extremes will bulldoze through people. They become bullies, not necessarily in the sense that like, oh, they're so good with words in the way they tear you apart. It's just like they will knock you down. And so there's a sense where it's actually really interesting that we get into concepts of like reds don't even consider the concept of inauthenticity. For them, it's just, I am who I am, deal with it. Yeah. Meanwhile, with an orange or a yellow or a green, there's so many concepts where I'm juggling how I'm perceived. The red's like, I am who I am. You don't like it? Now, they don't always have to be that confrontational about it. Sometimes they can just show up and just their natural, like I said, I need to bask in the presence of the red. Their natural confidence exudes. What's really interesting is that like when we look at orange, because it's right next to red, these two share a cusp of confidence. So what's happening in your dating life is that the orange, the goofy guy, right? I don't like being seen as the goofy guy. My yellow certainly doesn't like being seen as the goofy guy. But if I shift from my orange into my red, I become the confident charmer. And that's the name of the triad that you're really stepping into in that dating scene, where even though you've got the yellow, you're really looking for intimacy and the connection. You'll take the time to, even in that moment of silence, share the eye contact and feed off of that energy. But you're wearing almost like an orange. You're still outgoing. You're still charismatic. And then that red, it's I'm confident and I'm here. And ultimately, the strong centered red is like the masculine dad energy. And the strong centered yellow is that mom energy, that nurturing. When they kind of combine, red and yellow form steadfastness, which is really beautiful because that's like a loyalty that will always be there. And so many times in relationships, that's what's going on, is that someone with strong yellow tendencies finds themselves in a relationship with someone with strong red tendencies. And oh my gosh, I actually for now, like, I feel like I have direction in life and they complete me. I feel safe, stable, right? Versus someone with strong red tendencies find someone with yellow. Wow, they're the heart and I've never experienced life so beautifully. Being with them is like seeing the world in Technicolor. Now, those go into their extreme. Reds can become physically abusive. Yellows become victims and then will make excuses that perpetuate abuse because they're conflict resistant or conflict averse. And so that's where you get concepts with DV and where relationships can really go off the rails. So the red tendencies can really lose themselves in becoming literal oppressive forces. They also are great leaders, natural leaders, and they'll share that in common with purple. They share a cusp of leadership. But purples approach everything in terms of achievement. It's not about getting my way. It's about getting it done. So I don't need it to be perfect. I need it to be on time. I need to have a schedule. We need to develop a routine. And we need certain practices that ensure guaranteed results. So rather than, it's still in the interest of getting to a goal, but the way that we're getting to the goal is ultimately in service of other people. So it's interesting, like yellow, we were talking earlier about, it's all about servicing individuals on a one-to-one level. Purples, it's like customer service. I'm serving you on a professional level, or it's my duty or my job to show up and make sure the trains run on time. When we want an air traffic controller, we need purple. We need somebody who is methodical and who has systems. So even when it comes down to like making lists, like you did before the podcast, that prep work, planning, all of that is purple. So purples are incredible. People with strong purple personality tendencies are incredible managers. Now, you go and take them into an extreme context and they get tunnel vision. They go from managers to micromanagers, and they can become workaholics. One thing that we'll start getting into here is that the colors have complementary complements, I guess. So whereas yellow is really heart-focused, purple is really policy and efficiency focused. And so ultimately, if I'm in an extreme yellow state and I'm like a victim and I can't get out of this headspace, the goal is not to become more red and just become like, no, I'm so vindicated in my bulliness that I'm going to chop my husband's member off, right? Because that's what ends up happening there. It's actually to make a plan to get yourself out of that victim headspace. Stop looking at life so emotionally and look at it a little bit more practically and logically. Purples are very level-headed, the least likely to go into their extreme out of any of the colors because it doesn't make sense. Now, as a result, because they're so, in a sense, emotionally detached, they can become like, they just have a disregard for your emotions. It doesn't matter. You're fired. Please go. this is the end of our relationship. And there's a cold-heartedness that can develop in let's say the context of a professional relation or personal relationship. I can be so caught up in my professional career that I miss my son's Little League game. And so what we always tell, people with strong purple personality tendencies in their extreme is like schedule quality time. People with purple personality tendencies have a tendency to prioritize policy over people. And with yellow, it's the exact opposite. It's always people over the policy. Mm-hmm. Almost to the point where you get the guy in the school board meeting who's banging the gavel so hard that he breaks the gavel. That's when purple loses its, and also like when we got into this situation with the pandemic, we're enforcing rules and protocols that are kind of just being there to enforce rules and protocols because of the natural sense of alarm, but we need things to keep moving. Netflix enforced a policy around the Me Too movement that eye contact couldn't be held on set between members of the opposite sex for more than 6 seconds. This is a purple trying to solve a problem in a very impractical way, trying to be practical. And so when we get into concepts of like the threat of automation, the concepts of like dehumanization as we move into AI, and this is why I really speak, I have an issue with AI personally, not in the fact that it's an incredible asset and tool, but AI is a purple extreme that could go off, which means that we go into something that is overly systematic and a lot less emotional. It's like calling and not being able to connect with a customer service representative. I'm just talking to an automated system. Mm-hmm. But purples are always trying to figure out the most systematic way to approach life. And that's a real benefit. It's some place that I super lack in my personal life. And so I have to reach out and tap into that. Mm. And then the last one is the color that I test strongest in. And this is blue personality tendencies. It's about ingenuity. Problem solving. They're naturally curious. So your entire podcast here, like beyond the cover, only a blue would even have the desire to look at the book, or not even like, the orange will look at the book. Good luck having the orange read the book. They'll catch the audio book periodically or tune into the podcast, when they're bored. A blue will take the time and needs the solitude in order to learn and understand how things work. They want to look at the details and examine them. What's interesting is like purple, they are very methodical and want to get things done, but they need it to be perfect. Yeah. Purples just need it to work. A blue becomes a perfectionist and then will get in their own way. So if we're talking about the colors of a genius, blue is always there. Very, very good with words, but also when it comes to emotional intelligence, basically it doesn't exist. They become brutal honesty because the way that they see love is like, well, I love you enough to give you good feedback, which is the feedback is you suck. I love you enough to tell you that you suck. That's nice.
Did I test with blue?
Yeah. Well, then it showed up, it probably comes.
This is resonating right now. Man. And I'm sometimes too honest for my own good. But I to what you just said, I'm like, but I'm just being truthful. Like I feel like we've earned that respect with one another, where I can just like come out and tell you, as opposed to trying to like massage it out a certain way.
Why do I need to beat around the bush? It's a waste of time. Now this is going to be something with purple and blue, where it's like, hey, yeah, I know you have yellow emotions, but I need, it's not conducive to anything right now. Can we please get out of you being a victim? Because it doesn't make any damn sense. Here's the data. The data says you're not a victim. I don't care about your feelings. Feelings aren't facts. Ben Shapiro, so blue all day, And so in that blue headspace, we're always trying to be right. Now the extreme becomes, I'm making everybody wrong in the process of me being right. Yeah. So people with strong, extreme blue tendencies become arrogant. They are conceited, demeaning, dismissive. It's like all the people that just go, no, it's a conspiracy, or no, that's idiocy. And even the concept earlier when you were looking at your feedback and you're like, these idiots. Yeah. A blue's favorite word is idiot. And so we talk about like the colors that are most likely to get into their extreme. It's actually blue tendencies out of anything. All of the other colors require at least another person in the scenario. A blue, this person with strong blue tendencies can just have their phone, be reading the news, and be spinning out. Because it's a clown world and nothing makes sense. Yeah. Because these people don't see the world the same way that I do in terms of what is a fact. But what's interesting is that like our culture has become so influenced by the partisanship of blue merging with green that facts are narrative. And it depends on what website or what news organization you're subscribing to that is painting your lenses, right? And then that gets into sort of like what's actually happening behind the scenes of the news organization is the purples are, going, this is the way that we run the systems. We're going with this talking points. We disseminate that out. Now that's in its center. We call that the strategic triad, that color blend of purple, blue, and green. You take that into the extreme in its shadow self, and it becomes the partisan triad. Everything that I'm doing strategically is motivated by my bias. And so that's really what's sort of how our new system has evolved. And you just sort of look at these situations as going, okay, I acknowledge the extreme. I choose actively your center, because your center is actually who you are. The enemy will occasionally whisper in your ear, tell you that you deserve more or you aren't getting what you're entitled to. And it will temporarily take you into outer space. I have to remember who you are as your friend or your partner, and I've got to hold on to that center, knowing that based on your personality tendencies and the way you take this test, this is where you tend to go.
Yeah.
So in a way, when you do that, inevitably, I can go, hey, actually understand. Let's take some time, love and accept, but we don't get caught up in those things where it's just that push and pull where we're so, well, why are you doing that and interpreting in that? It is the allowance of grace and understanding.
You understand. You just said it. Yeah, right there. You understand. And when you understand, you can say, hey, like the way that you explained all that was so eloquent. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to dive into the center versus the extremes of each. Because I know that I resonated with multiple colors because, again, we're not just one, right? We're a complex being. And so I know those that listen and watch are going to feel that same way and go, oh, I can associate with that color for sure. Well, then what happens is that now that you know what color you are, or the color scheme, you can start to go, okay, when I'm in this extreme, I can give myself grace because this tracks. It's like, where is this coming from? It's coming from my color scheme. It's coming from who I am. I mean, I'm not, the only person on the planet that thinks like this. I'm not screwed up. I'm falling in line. I'm doing exactly what a, orange in its extreme is supposed to do.
Right.
On the other side of that, when someone knows your color scheme, now they can go, okay, Clayton's in his extreme right now. So this is where he's going to be at. Rationale is out the window. And I need to give him whatever it is, space. I need to, give him understanding, grace, whatever, or maybe I need to get something done. So like, I know he's in his extreme. So how can I balance the extreme right now in order to be effective at getting to this end goal, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So it's taking like the complexity of humans and then simplifying it in colors. But by having the understanding of what the colors mean, you can start to have conversations and you see in color. Yeah. So when you talk to me, you see in color.
It's like the color matrix, called that for a reason. Initially this company was called Primary Colors. My mother developed it, and it was licensed and administered for 40 years by Prep Inc., which is one of the leading relationship researchers in the nation, and the schools, organizations, the military. But it was always a 4-page paper pamphlet. Yeah. And there's only so far that can go. Right. I was always tangentially familiar with it, but then in 2020, my mom and I had a huge falling out. And essentially, it was over 20 things, and it happened all on Facebook. It led to her saying, I need to take a step back from our relationship. Though she didn't disown me, it felt very much like she did. And I was left there in that absence and that emptiness going, oh no, I just sacrificed my relationship with the woman who gave me life for imaginary points on a Facebook scoreboard. What happened was my blue extreme tendencies really went off the edge, along with my orange extreme tendencies, and that became acrimonious. And I just targeted like 20 posts on Facebook that I perceived to be misinformation or bias, and so also my green was going on too, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure out how to reconcile the relationship. Didn't want to lose my mom, and there was this essential message that became the message of the color matrix, which is find wisdom in perspectives that you reject. The greatest thing that strength can learn is to let go. That's the wisdom of warmth. The greatest thing that warmth can learn is to take accountability, and that's the wisdom of strength. You try to put them in a room together to learn that, they'll repulse each other. But if they're open and they have the technology and the tools, then they can find that common understanding. They can come back to center together, as opposed to being in their extremes, being led by entitlement, as opposed to appreciation of the offering of connection. So I had to appreciate. My mother had written so many books. She developed this whole tech. Was I just going to disregard that, or was I going to learn from the wisdom? And so we developed it into an app. And ever since I started working with this tech, it's like taking the red pill and the blue pill from the Matrix, but like also the purple pill, the green pill, the yellow pill, and the orange pill. And now I just see the code everywhere in how it comes alive in people in speaking. Even when you were talking about accolades earlier, that's purple language. And when your red combines with your orange and combines with your purple, that is the opportunist triad. That's what led you to be on The Bachelor. In the same extreme, that red, orange, and purple is the corruptible triad, which may be why post-Bachelor you started getting some of the feedback that you got. But it's not anything where that's fixed or forever. It's just a temporary, momentary snapshot of an evaluation because we always grow and develop. And so ultimately, and I helped develop the technology into the color matrix because it is, while incredibly simple to take. And I'd invite anybody who's listening to go online to thecolormatrix.com, and you can sign up in order to take the test and learn your colors today. But it's so simple and fun. It's gamified. You pop bubbles, and it's accessible in a way that like a second grader could understand.
It was very, I would say, not to say it's simplistic in nature, but it was so easy to pop bubbles. I took the test, and then you and I sat down and talked about it, but it was just like, it kept my attention. I'm just popping bubbles. So like the kid in me is just like pop, pop, pop. And then I'm getting complex answers on the other side of it. Yeah.
And there's a little bit of ASMR aesthetic with the nature of hearing the bubble pop. It's fun. It's good. It's satisfying. But that being said, it's so simple. It goes so incredibly deep, which is why now I've got to launch a podcast, the Personality Color Matrix podcast, where we're launching into this and exploring things and helping people understand themselves and others better so that they can connect more and feel less disconnection. Because that disconnection is like a real serious pain point, but it's in the back of our hearts or our minds. Not the thing that like is we have to get our car working. That's what I got to spend money on. But when it really comes down to like improving your relationship, your marriage, it is so much more expensive to get divorced than it is to take, you and your partner to take a $99 personality assessment. And then our technology is beautiful because it allows people to compare results. Yeah. And so I can map on and really algorithmically figure out how to heal miscommunications and issues. Fortunately, it's really helped my mom and I come back together. And when I speak to like, you really have to choose the center of a person over the extreme. My mom and I still, it's not ever easy. Yeah. Even though she's an incredibly, wise woman, she has her extremes and I have my extremes. But whenever we're in that space, I have to recommit to loving her center. And so I gave her letters, almost like Superman, that she would wear on your chest. And so I would never forget who she was. I gave her WHO, Wise Healing Oracle. So she can go, and sometimes she can be a B word. And by that, I mean my boss. She's just bossy. But then I go, no. She's who, remember who she is, Wise Healing Oracle. I choose that center. That's ultimately what the technology can promise. And then this is looping it back to the matrix. You get to be the one that your relationship needs.
Oh man, I got chills because it's just like, that was a perfect, beautiful journey through like a part of the book of life for you. And really, it shows how centered you are and how well you know yourself, but you're giving people the ability to, I see this, being an absolute incredible, gift that someone could give their significant other. That's fun. That's enjoyable. Let's both take this test and then let's sit down and talk about it and talk about the results and give examples of how I am a green or how I'm a red and in my life. Hey, remember that one time when this happened? Well, I would attribute that to my orange, and that's because this. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, when I was in my yellow state, this is what happened. Oh, and so now all of a sudden there's the curiosity of like how, and it allows that people to be proactive, where it's like, instead of being reactive, let's get ahead of the game now. Let's be able to identify what we are. And again, really just take the time to understand the colors. So when we're in that next argument, because it doesn't, like we're not going to learn our colors and then avoid all argument. As you said, like your mom's complex. And so you guys will butt heads and you will forever butt heads, even though you guys have this breadth of knowledge. But at least the next time that we're in this this argumentative state, I can, step back and label them and say, green, she's in her green right now, or in her red. Okay. And understand that it's like, this is a part of a multifaceted human being. They're going there because this is the way that they're hardwired. But remember the positive of this color, because I'm seeing the extreme or the negative, and maybe we don't call it positive or negative, but I'm seeing their extreme. But always remember that centered portion still exists. So I can hate the extreme at points, but understand that like that person will recenter. And that's what I love, is that centeredness.
And that's the appreciation.
Yeah.
And that's the cure to the entitlement. Today, my mother and I got into a tiff based on our clashing perspectives. But then, part of our technology is how to stay in the center.
Mhm.
And really, like you said, extremes are inevitable. The question is, how quickly can we return to center and how effectively, doing the least amount of damage while we're in our extremes?
Yeah.
And for us, it's now actually, we can kind of bounce back. We have to do something that we call an enritual. It's an enriching routine. For us, that is as working together in a company and also mother and son. We just got to walk a mile every morning and we talk. And so even after our little thing, I was like, hey, I love that. I think that we should, or what just happened? I didn't love it, but also I love you and I want us to still do our ritual. And then in that, we started off the walk and it was raining and she was like, I'm not sure. I said, no, this is a test. Here we go. Rain immediately cleared up. And then the communication, also the miscommunication cleared up and it was beautiful. So sometimes it's always this choice of, do we proceed towards love or do we withdraw from it? And then also, do we choose someone's center proceeding towards love, or do we choose their extreme and withdraw from it? Because like with the Matrix, life can be prison or it can be paradise. You choose. We see what we seek. And so I would always tell people to seek out the blessings as opposed to focus on the perceived lack.
Yeah.
And this goes to like the last thing, being vulnerable and honest about how relationships fall apart. That is a great strength. And it's why my mother and I decided to write this book, The Personality Color Matrix. It tells our stories and also looks at all of the enmity and the rampant entitlement that's going on in the West that's creating the cancel culture or the culture war, just really the extremism on both sides. Mm-hmm. How do we find that common understanding using these colors? And what's really cool is that usually it's $99 in order to access the assessment. But because the book launch is happening, if people buy a $29 book, they get the $99 test and a ebook that can help them walk through it for free. Yeah. And so it's essentially and hopefully we can give you that sales link. But this is that book comes out May 23rd. And just in the meantime, it's all about getting this message out there of connection and the possibility that even, when it feels like hopeless, you are not better off, despite what MSNBC or CNN or even Fox News is telling you, you're not better off cutting out these family members out of your life because you ideologically don't share the same worldview. That those relationships are so important and nurturing. I'm not saying that in all cases, don't be overly yellow and make excuses for people, but don't try to judge them and cut them out. Stay open to reconciliation.
Yeah. Corbin, this was an incredibly gratifying conversation. I'm so grateful for your presence as a human, the energy that you brought today. For those that want to continue to follow along with your journey, get involved with what you're doing, it's thecolormatrix.com, right? That was
yes.
the website. And then how else can people find you and continue watching you?
All of the handles are the Color Matrix, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. And also Fluwood. We were talking earlier about the alter egos. I just released an album that's available on all platforms called Set Free. And Fluid is spelled FLOOWOOD. It's like conscious hip hop mixed with conscious pop. And that's an element where I get to sort of explore. And my color blend, green, blue, and orange, which you dance on, is the creative triad. And so that's my outlet for a lot of that. It's a really beautiful thing to sometimes even take the shadow self and through the art of alchemy, transmute the pain or the narcissistic entitlement or all of that, the suffering and misery, and turn it into beautiful art. That's what Fluid has always allowed me to do. And so in a way, anything that ever was a toxic, masculine stereotype has been refined into something that just appreciates.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, man, thank you.